At the beginning of the 16th century, the Ottoman Empire stood at the height of its rise. Stretching across Anatolia, the Balkans, the Middle East, and parts of North Africa, it had become one of the world's most formidable powers. Its armies were feared across 3 continents. Its cities thrived through trade, and its sultans claimed leadership over millions of subjects from diverse cultures and faiths. Into this expanding empire, in 1494, was born the prince who would one day become its greatest ruler, Suleiman the Magnificent. Suleiman was born in Trabzon on the Black Sea coast during the reign of his grandfather, Bayezid II. His father, Suleiman, was a determined and formidable commander whose conquests dramatically expanded Ottoman territory. By defeating the Mamluk Sultanate in 1516 to 1517, Selim brought Syria, Egypt, and the holy cities of Mecca and Medina under Ottoman rule, transforming the empire into the leading power of the Islamic world. As the son of such a ruler, Suleiman's future was never ordinary. Like other Ottoman princes, he received a rigorous education designed to prepare him for sovereignty. Under the guidance of leading scholars, he studied the Quran, Islamic law, history, literature, mathematics, and statecraft. He also learned several languages, including Ottoman Turkish, Persian, and Arabic, enabling him to engage with the empire's diverse intellectual and cultural traditions. Alongside his academic studies, he trained in military strategy, horsemanship, swordsmanship, and the practical skills expected of a future commander. Education alone was not considered sufficient. Following Ottoman custom, young princes were appointed as provincial governors, allowing them to gain first-hand experience in administration before ascending the throne. Suleiman served as governor in Kaffa and later in Manisa, where he learned how to manage taxation, maintain public order, administer justice, and work alongside experienced officials. These assignments provided invaluable preparation for the responsibilities that awaited him. Every stage of Suleiman's upbringing reflected a single expectation, that he would one day govern one of the world's largest and most complex empires. The lessons he absorbed were not simply about winning battles, but about balancing military strength with law, diplomacy, and effective administration. Long before he wore the imperial turban or commanded vast armies, Suleiman was being shaped for leadership. History often remembers the moment a ruler receives the crown, but the foundations of greatness are usually laid years earlier, long before the world begins to watch. When Suleiman died in September 1520, the vast Ottoman Empire passed to his only surviving son, Suleiman the Magnificent. At just 26 years of age, Suleiman inherited one of the most powerful states in the world. Its borders stretched from the Danube to Egypt and from eastern Anatolia to North Africa. Yet with such immense power came equally immense expectations. He was expected not only to preserve his father's achievements, but to lead an empire whose influence was still expanding. Outside the Ottoman court, many European rulers viewed the transition with cautious optimism. Suleiman had earned a reputation as a relentless conqueror whose campaigns reshaped the political map of the Middle East. By comparison, his young successor was largely untested. Some believed Suleiman would spend years consolidating his authority or become distracted by palace politics, giving Europe's kingdoms valuable time to strengthen their own defenses. They underestimated him. Suleiman had spent years preparing for this responsibility. His education in governance, military affairs, diplomacy, and Islamic law had convinced him that a ruler's duty extended beyond conquest. Soon after taking the throne, he focused on strengthening the administration of the empire. He worked closely with experienced officials to ensure that justice was applied consistently, provincial governors remained accountable, and the institutions built by earlier sultans continued to function effectively. At the same time, Suleiman possessed ambitions that reached far beyond preserving the status quo. He admired the achievements of earlier Ottoman rulers, particularly Mehmet II, who had captured Constantinople, and his father Selim, who had expanded the empire deep into the Arab world. Yet Suleiman was not content merely to inherit their legacy. He sought to surpass it. His vision was to establish the Ottoman Empire as the unquestioned dominant power across Europe, Asia, and the Mediterranean, combining military success with stable government and a reputation for justice. Within the imperial court, the young sultan quickly demonstrated confidence and discipline. He surrounded himself with capable administrators, listened to experienced advisors, and approached both domestic and foreign policy with careful planning rather than impulsive action. Those who had mistaken his youth for weakness soon discovered that he possessed the qualities expected of an Ottoman ruler. The crown had passed to him through inheritance. But respect, from his soldiers, his subjects, and his rivals, would have to be earned through his own decisions. Suleiman understood that an empire could be inherited. Greatness never could. The early years of Suleiman the Magnificent's reign quickly dispelled any doubts about his ability to lead. Within months of ascending the throne, he launched a series of military campaigns that demonstrated both strategic vision and determination. These victories would not only expand the Ottoman Empire, but also establish Suleiman as one of the most formidable rulers of the 16th century. His first major objective was the fortress city of Belgrade. Previous Ottoman sultans, including Mehmet II, had failed to capture this key stronghold, which guarded the gateway into Central Europe. In 1521, Suleiman led a determined campaign against the city. After a sustained siege, Belgrade fell to the Ottomans, opening an important route toward the heart of Europe and signaling that the empire's expansion would continue under its new ruler. The following year, Suleiman turned his attention to the island of Rhodes, held by the Knights Hospitaller. From this heavily fortified island, the Knights had long disrupted Ottoman shipping and challenged Muslim control of the eastern Mediterranean. The siege of Rhodes in 1522 proved difficult, with fierce resistance from its defenders. After months of intense fighting, however, the Knights negotiated an honorable surrender. Suleiman permitted them to leave the island with their weapons and possessions, a decision that reflected both military confidence and political calculation. These victories greatly enhanced Suleiman's reputation, but an even greater triumph awaited him. In 1526, he marched north once again, confronting the forces of the Kingdom of Hungary at the Battle of Mohacs. The engagement lasted little more than 2 hours, yet its consequences were enormous. The Hungarian army was decisively defeated, and Louis II of Hungary died while fleeing the battlefield. The medieval Kingdom of Hungary effectively collapsed, creating a political vacuum that would shape Central European history for generations. News of Mohacs spread rapidly across Europe. Kings, emperors, and nobles realized that the Ottoman Empire was no longer a distant Eastern power. It had become a direct and formidable force at the gates of Central Europe. Suleiman's victories inspired admiration among his allies and deep concern among his rivals. His name became synonymous with military success, and European courts began to view him as one of the greatest commanders of the age. With every campaign, Suleiman expanded not only his empire, but also his reputation. Each victory brought new territory, greater influence, and growing prestige. And with every triumph, the young sultan moved one step closer to becoming a legend. By the late 1520s, Suleiman the Magnificent had transformed the Ottoman Empire into the dominant military power of southeastern Europe. The victories at Belgrade, Rhodes, and the Battle of Mohacs had shattered long-standing rivals and opened the heart of Central Europe to Ottoman expansion. Yet one city remained beyond his reach, a city whose capture would carry immense strategic and symbolic importance. That city was Vienna. As the capital of the Habsburg monarchy in Central Europe, Vienna stood as the principal defensive barrier between the Ottoman Empire and the German states of the Holy Roman Empire. If the city fell, Ottoman influence could extend deeper into Europe than ever before. Its capture would not simply represent another territorial gain. It would demonstrate that no European capital was beyond Suleiman's reach. In 1529, after securing much of Hungary, Suleiman led a massive army toward Vienna. The campaign reflected both his confidence and his ambition. However, the advance proved far more difficult than earlier victories. Heavy rains turned roads into deep mud, slowing the movement of soldiers, artillery, and supply wagons. Many of the empire's largest siege cannons became impossible to transport and had to be abandoned along the route, depriving the Ottomans of some of their most powerful weapons before the siege even began. When Suleiman's forces finally reached Vienna in late September, they encountered determined defenders who had spent valuable time strengthening the city's fortifications. Although greatly outnumbered, the garrison repaired damaged walls, repelled repeated assaults, and resisted Ottoman mining operations beneath the city's defenses. Every day that passed weakened the besieging army. Supplies dwindled, disease spread, and the cold autumn weather grew increasingly severe. Recognizing that winter was approaching and that a prolonged siege threatened his army more than the defenders, Suleiman made the difficult decision to withdraw in October 1529. Vienna had survived. Although the campaign did not achieve its immediate objective, it was far from a decisive defeat for the Ottoman Empire. Suleiman retained control over much of Hungary, and the Ottomans remained the dominant military power in southeastern Europe for decades. Nevertheless, the siege revealed an important reality. Even the greatest empire faced practical limits imposed by distance, logistics, weather, and determined resistance. For many European rulers, Vienna became a symbol of successful defense. For the Ottomans, it served as a reminder that conquest depended on far more than battlefield victories alone. History often celebrates triumph, but some campaigns are remembered not because they ended in victory, but because they revealed the boundaries of even the greatest conquerors. Suleiman's march to Vienna proved that greatness is measured not only by the cities a ruler captures, but also by the challenges he dares to confront. While Suleiman the Magnificent expanded the Ottoman Empire across Europe and the Middle East, he understood that true imperial power could not rest on land alone. The Mediterranean was the economic lifeline of the 16th century, connecting Europe, North Africa, and the Near East through commerce, diplomacy, and war. Whoever controlled its sea lanes possessed enormous influence over regional trade and military strategy. To strengthen Ottoman naval power, Suleiman relied on one of the greatest admirals of the age, Hayreddin Barbarossa. Originally active as a corsair in the western Mediterranean alongside his brother Erich, Barbarossa eventually entered Ottoman service and was appointed Grand Admiral of the Ottoman fleet. Under Suleiman's patronage, he transformed the empire's navy into one of the most formidable maritime forces in the world. Together, the Sultan and his admiral challenged the naval dominance of the Habsburg monarchy and other Christian powers. Ottoman fleets captured strategic ports, secured North African territories, and projected power across the eastern and central Mediterranean. Their greatest naval triumph came in 1538 at the Battle of Preveza, where Barbarossa defeated the fleet of the Holy League commanded by Andrea Doria. The victory established Ottoman naval supremacy in much of the Mediterranean for decades. This dominance carried enormous strategic and economic benefits. Merchant ships sailing under Ottoman protection connected the empire's ports from Alexandria and Istanbul to the Balkans and North Africa. Control of key sea routes facilitated trade in grain, spices, textiles, and other valuable goods while allowing the rapid movement of soldiers and supplies between distant provinces. The Mediterranean became not merely a battlefield but a vital artery of the empire. European rulers recognized the growing challenge. Spain, Venice, Genoa, and the Habsburgs invested heavily in their own fleets, leading to an intense rivalry that shaped Mediterranean politics throughout Suleiman's reign. Naval warfare became as important as campaigns fought on land, with control of ports and shipping lanes often determining the balance of power. By combining military strength on land with naval supremacy at sea, Suleiman elevated the Ottoman Empire into a truly global power of the 16th century. His empire was defended by armies that marched across continents and fleets that ruled the sea. For Suleiman, conquest did not end at the shoreline. He understood that the greatest empires are built not only upon the land they hold, but also upon the waters they command. Although Europe remembered him as Suleiman the Magnificent for his military triumphs, many of his own subjects knew Suleiman the Magnificent by a different title, Kanuni, meaning the lawgiver. To the people of the Ottoman Empire, his greatest achievements were not measured only by conquered cities, but by the laws and institutions that strengthened the empire from within. When Suleiman came to the throne in 1520, the Ottoman state already possessed a sophisticated legal system based on Islamic law, or Sharia, alongside imperial regulations issued by earlier sultans. Suleiman sought to organize and refine these laws rather than replace them. He commissioned legal scholars and administrators to compile, clarify, and standardize imperial legislation, reducing contradictions that had accumulated over generations. His reforms covered taxation, land ownership, criminal justice, and administrative procedures. By establishing clearer legal standards, Suleiman aimed to ensure that provincial governors, judges, and officials exercised their authority more consistently. The reforms also sought to limit abuses of power and improve the relationship between the central government and its diverse subjects, who included Muslims, Christians, and Jews spread across 3 continents. For Suleiman, justice was not simply a moral ideal, it was a foundation of stable government. He believed that an empire as vast as the Ottoman state could not be held together by military strength alone. Fair administration, predictable laws, and capable institutions were equally essential to preserving order and loyalty. His vision extended beyond government. Among the figures who defined this remarkable period was Mimar Sinan, the empire's greatest architect. Serving as chief imperial architect, Sinan designed hundreds of structures, including mosques, bridges, aqueducts, schools, hospitals, and caravanserais. His masterpiece, the Suleimani Mosque in Istanbul, commissioned by Suleiman, became a symbol of Ottoman architectural achievement. More than a place of worship, the complex included educational institutions, charitable facilities, and public services that benefited the city's inhabitants. Across the empire, roads, bridges, water systems, and public buildings strengthened both daily life and imperial administration. These projects reflected Suleiman's belief that a ruler's responsibility extended beyond warfare to the prosperity and well-being of his people. Military victories expanded the empire's borders, but it was law, architecture, learning, and effective institutions that gave those victories lasting meaning. The greatest rulers are remembered not only for the battles they win, but for the civilization they leave behind. Suleiman understood that conquest could build an empire. Only justice and enduring institutions could sustain it. For all of Suleiman the Magnificent's victories on distant battlefields, some of the most consequential struggles of his reign unfolded within the walls of the Topkapi Palace. The politics of the imperial court, shaped by family loyalties, rivalries, and the question of succession, would leave lasting marks on both the Sultan and the future of the Ottoman Empire. At the center of this story was Sultan, known in Europe as Roxolana. Believed to have originated from Ruthenia, she entered the Ottoman court as a slave before rising to become Suleiman's closest companion. In a remarkable break from long-standing Ottoman custom, Suleiman legally married Hurrem, elevating her to a position of unprecedented influence within the imperial household. Hurrem became more than the Sultan's wife. She corresponded with foreign rulers, sponsored charitable foundations, and played an active role in court affairs. Her influence helped transform the position of the imperial consort and marked the beginning of a period in Ottoman history during which women of the palace exercised increasing political authority. To supporters, she was an intelligent and capable advisor. To critics, she became a controversial figure whose influence altered the balance of power within the court. As Suleiman grew older, another challenge became impossible to ignore: the question of succession. Unlike many European monarchies, the Ottoman Empire had no fixed law of primogeniture. Any prince of the dynasty could potentially inherit the throne. While this system allowed capable rulers to emerge, it also encouraged intense competition among the Sultan's sons and their supporters. Rival factions formed within the palace, each seeking to secure the future of a different prince. In 1553, during a campaign in Persia, Suleiman ordered Mustafa's execution. The decision shocked the empire. Many contemporaries viewed the prince as the natural heir, and his death provoked grief, anger, and lasting controversy. Historians continue to debate the extent to which Sultan and her allies influenced the outcome, but definitive evidence remains elusive. What is certain is that the execution deeply affected Suleiman's reign and reshaped the succession. The tragedy illustrated the harsh realities of dynastic rule. To protect the throne, an Ottoman sultan was sometimes required to make decisions that carried immense personal cost. The empire demanded stability, but stability often came at the expense of family. Suleiman had defeated kings, emperors, and rival armies. Yet some of his most painful battles were fought not on the battlefield, but within the walls of his own palace, where power and blood were impossible to separate. Even in his 70s, Suleiman the Magnificent refused to withdraw from military command. After more than 4 decades on the throne, he had already led numerous campaigns across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Age and declining health had slowed him, but they had not diminished his sense of duty. Like the warrior sultans before him, Suleiman believed that the ruler of the Ottoman Empire should stand with his army in the field. In 1566, he launched one final campaign against the Habsburg monarchy in Hungary. The Ottoman army advanced toward the fortress of Sightvar Fortress, defended by the Croatian nobleman Nikola Forzrinski. Though small in comparison to the Ottoman force, the defenders resisted fiercely, turning what many expected to be a swift siege into a determined and costly struggle. As the siege continued, Suleiman's health deteriorated rapidly. On the night of September 6 to 7, 1566, before the fortress had fallen, the 71-year-old Sultan died in his command tent from natural causes. The ruler who had transformed the Ottoman Empire into one of the world's greatest powers passed away not in a palace, but on campaign alongside his soldiers. His death, however, was kept secret. Recognizing the potential consequences for morale and military discipline, the empire's senior officials, including Sultan Mehmed Pasha, concealed the news from the army. The siege continued under the existing chain of command, and shortly afterward, Ottoman forces captured Sightvar. Only after the victory was secured was Suleiman's death publicly announced, allowing for an orderly transition to the reign of his son, Selim II. The final campaign reflected the principles that had defined Suleiman's life. He had ruled for 46 years, commanded armies across 3 continents, and overseen one of the greatest periods in Ottoman history. Yet when his final moment came, he chose to remain where he had spent much of his reign, among his troops, fulfilling the responsibilities of a sultan. Many rulers end their lives surrounded by the comforts of the palace. Suleiman ended his in the service of his empire. His final campaign became a lasting reminder that true leadership is measured not only by the victories a ruler achieves, but by the commitment to remain with his people until the very end. By the time Suleiman the Magnificent died in 1566, the Ottoman Empire had reached a level of power and influence unmatched in its history. Stretching from the gates of Vienna to the Persian frontier, and from the Crimean Peninsula to North Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, the empire stood at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa. It controlled major trade routes, commanded one of the world's strongest armies, and possessed a navy that dominated much of the Mediterranean. Yet Suleiman's achievements were not measured by territory alone. His reign witnessed extraordinary growth in architecture, literature, law, education, and administration. Cities such as Istanbul flourished as centers of commerce and culture, while the legal reforms, public works, and architectural masterpieces commissioned during his rule strengthened the empire from within. The combination of military success, effective governance, and cultural achievement is why historians commonly refer to his reign as the Ottoman Golden Age. Across 3 continents, Ottoman influence could be felt in diplomacy, trade, religion, and warfare. European monarchs closely watched the empire's policies, merchants traveled through its ports, and scholars contributed to its intellectual life. For much of the 16th century, the Ottoman Empire stood alongside the greatest powers of the world, shaping international politics on an unprecedented scale. But no empire remains unchanged forever.